Thanks to Sana Skin Studio for supporting the No podcast. Sana is a skin studio that is shifting the relationship with your skin and your products through goal-driven facials, real guidance, and clean skincare. Stay tuned for our promo code so you can receive $25 off of your first facial at Sana Skin Studio. Welcome to the No podcast with me, Nikki Spo. What is up, truth speakers and light seekers? You are listening to The Know, where it is not about knowing everything. It's about coming to know ourselves. Today, we are tapping into another episode within an episode. It's a lot of fun to be on the other side of the questions, and I'm excited to let you guys get a glimpse of me being interviewed. I recently had the privilege of being hosted on one of my former guests' podcast, the Mindful Corner podcast by Dr. Erika Velez, who I interviewed in episode 101 of The Know. With Dr. Velez's permission, I am sharing our recording with my audience. And in this episode, I open up about my sobriety, finding hope, and forgiving myself. And it is my hope that Dr. Velez and I can help even just one person by sharing this. I hope you enjoy our conversation, and I want to encourage you to check out the Mindful Corner podcast by Dr. Erika Velez on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Let's go. Welcome back to the Mindful Corner podcast. This is your host, Dr. Erika Velez, and today I'm so excited to have Nikki here join us. Nikki, thank you so much for joining us.
Dr. Velez, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and hopefully share my experience, strength, and hope with your audience and through the power of storytelling, right?
Yeah, that's the whole premise of the show, right? Is to share our experiences with the hopes that someone out there is listening can relate and can draw something from these stories. So I'll let you take it from here. Tell us a little bit about you and tell us about the story you want to share today.
Well, I think I want to start off by saying I think a lot of our stories are drastically different, right? In the way that they sound, but I think that a lot of the feelings are the same. I think that we're all searching for something. I personally, on my own podcast, I call it the inner knowing, right? I think a lot of us are trying to come home to ourselves, and the journeys that we've been through, the struggles that we've been through, the trials and tribulations of our lives, have shaped us in such a way in which we are searching for that feeling of coming home and being safe within our own minds and bodies. And I felt really unsafe in my own mind and body for a long, long, long time. And I grew up here in Miami, born and raised, grew up in Kendall. I went to public schools my whole life. I'm an only child. I don't have any brothers or sisters. And for context of how I grew up, middle working class family. My mom was mostly a stay-at-home mom and a substitute teacher, and my dad was a firefighter. So there was addiction in my upbringing. My mom was an addict. She was an alcoholic, and, she used pills, and that was a reckoning for her. I remember there being a very significant turning point. My mom lost her job when I was about 4 years old, and I don't know that she ever, I feel like that crushed her soul. And she lost her identity and turned to coping with the use of alcohol. I've always been really mindful about that, how I identify myself, and trying not to put all of my identity into one specific thing, which I will actually come back to in a full circle moment, later on in the story. But I generally felt very happy in my childhood. But I definitely knew that something was wrong, that things with my mom weren't right. And I built an anger and a resentment, I think, towards authority in general. I felt like the adults in my life weren't necessarily safe. And that is that my father is a great individual. He's a really good person, but for what it's worth, he was busy working for our family. He was at the fire department overnight sometimes, right? So there was a big part of me that was I have to take care of my mom. I have to lock up my house. I have to feed myself dinner. I don't have respect for your authority in my life when I'm a child playing the role of an adult.
Mm-hmm. Parentified.
Right. I'm now stepping into a parent role as a child, and that should not be my responsibility. Mm-hmm. While my dad is away. And then my dad was away, but he wasn't seeing what was going on behind the scenes when he wasn't there. And so I developed a weird, I don't think it's weird. I actually think it's kind of normal for me to do this, is I am an independent child. Mm-hmm. And you can't really give me rules. because I don't really respect your rules because you don't care for me. Not that they don't care about me, not that they don't love me. I think that my parents loved me in the best way that they knew how. Even my mom, as she struggled with addiction, I think that she loved me in the best way that she knew how. And, you know, I have a history of childhood sexual abuse in my life. And that took a long time for me to even say out loud. I didn't say that. I didn't recover those memories until I was 27 years old. And there's a bunch of statistics that I'm sure you know that like there's like, and there's laws that attorneys are trying to change and lawmakers are trying to change so that like when you come out doesn't impact what happens when you do, like how old you are when you recover or whenever you choose to speak up doesn't impact the validity of your claim.
Of course, because like many,
You know?
it takes years to
It takes years. And especially in men who I think men in general are taught like to push these feelings down and not talk about these things, you know? And so that's a whole other topic of conversation, but like that is part of my history, my personal history. And I think that it affected a lot of my life thereafter, meaning like as I became a teenager, I was always seeking attention. I found an escape through dance. Like I was the first person after school at the dance studio. I was the last one to leave. They're like locking up the doors. They're saying, Nikki, you got to go home. But like it was better for me to be over there doing like dance, practicing dance than to be in my home, you know? And so I learned a great deal of escapism in that time of my life. And I wasn't like drinking or using at that point yet, which, you know, I currently identify as an alcoholic, and that's part of the journey of how I came to cope with all of my big feelings over a period of time. And I think a lot of people wonder if it's like chemical or if it's environmental. And I think that it's a lot of it is both personally. But back then, like dance was my drug, right? Like that was my drug of choice. I poured my whole life, my whole heart into it, and nothing really else mattered. But I also was a teenager and I experimented with older people a lot. Like, and, you know, I've done a lot of work with a trauma psychologist who we've worked through this in a way that I was trying to take control over my sexuality when that had been taken from me at a very young age. So in my own indirect way, I was like saying, no, I'm going to do this on my terms. Even if it's inappropriate, I'm still going to do this on my terms. And I'm going to somehow be empowered by this. Like in hindsight, I see it a lot different, but like, I can see how my teenage self was like doing that to like take some of my own
power back. Yeah.
Yeah. Like definitely like saying like, I'm going to do this. Like, and it's going to be on my terms, not on your terms, my terms. I moved on. I danced for the Miami Heat after high school. Didn't want to be a Miami Heat dancer. Didn't care to be a Miami Heat dancer. I thought like, honestly, I thought they were like silly dancers. I didn't think that like professional sports dance teams were like legit. Like now they're like, I have a totally different perspective of it. I've judged their auditions. Like these women are so talented, so smart, so capable, so multifaceted. But at the time when I'm in high school, I'm like, I'm a real dancer. Like I'm not going to shake up my pom-poms, you know, at these sports games. I didn't care about sports. But I tried out and I made the team and I was like, me, you want me? At the time I had gotten kicked out of my house. My dad, my parents got divorced when I was 18 due to my mom's alcoholism. And my parents separated. And
can I pause you there? How was that? Because I find that what I find is that sometimes parents wait until the child is 18 and it's kind of like, okay, now you're 18, you know, I don't have to put up with your dad or your mom, and they go their separate ways. And sometimes parents think that's easier, but what was your case?
So I was begging them to get a divorce for a long time. Okay. Like I mentioned, like my dad didn't see a lot of the really, really bad stuff that happened between me and my mom passed away last year. And I've had to have like my own like healing experience with her passing and like come to terms and have like find my peace with her, like as she has passed on and everything. But like nobody was helping my mom, you know, like, and today, like I see it, I look back and I'm like, I think, Dad, you could have done something more to help her, you know, like you were her husband, like you made a vow to her, like you should have done that. But at the time I was so angry and resentful at my mom for being the way that she was, that I was just like, I can't live like this. Like I was a really grown, mature child who was very used to taking care of herself. And I'm like, I can't live in this insanity. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I would beg my dad all the time. I'm like, please leave her, like leave her. I need to go. Like, I can't live here. Remember, I don't have brothers or sisters to like bounce these things off or make my own little like team with. It was just me and them.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was 18, my mom got a DUI and like was mandated to go to a rehabilitation center. And I think that was the last straw for my dad,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is really sad because like that was like the first time she had ever gotten help. And as an addict myself, like I know that it doesn't always happen on the first try. And it takes a lot of love and compassion from your loved ones, like to actually help you through a place when you want to get help. And I do believe that like the individual has to want it for themselves, because you can't want it enough for anybody else. But I also don't think that like there was enough. I just don't think that my mom had any real support, you know? So they went their separate ways. I was relieved. So I went on to live with my dad. I was like, great. She's crazy. I don't have to live with her. Like she can drink herself to death if she needs to. Like I can't do it anymore. I'm working as a Miami dancer, and I work teaching dance classes. And my dad meets his second wife, and it was like, okay, she's 18, your daughter's 18. Like she needs to move out of the house. I'm going to move in and I'm going to move my daughter in. So next thing I know, like I'm looking for an apartment. I have no money. And basically my dad was like, you're going to be financially independent. So that was a really scary time for me. Like, because I think that like, I looked at my dad as my protector, and my dad was like, if there was an advocate in my life, like he was the closest thing to it. And here he was like moving me out and bringing another family in and then telling me to be financially independent. I'm like, I don't have any money to be financially independent. Like, what am I supposed to do? So I got 3 jobs. I was a heat dancer. I taught nighttime dance classes to kids. I worked at a high-end retail boutique, and I danced at like Live and Cameo and all these nightclubs. And so I was in nightlife, you know, like I was this was very common for working dancers to do. Like I mean, this is very like, it's appropriate. You're wearing clothes. Like it's just like feathers and go-go dancing at like Live, Space, Mansion, Cameo, you know, like back in the day, Miami. And it was fun. Like I did it with all my friends. It was fun, but it was a lot of work. I was a full-time student. I was paying my own tuition. I was paying my rent. I lived in a literal closet that I paid $400 a month to live in, like completely supporting myself. My dad was in a space where he's like, I don't think you should go to college. I'm like, what? He's like, I don't think you should go to college. And that's not to say that everybody should go to college. Like, I am not that person who's like, everybody needs to go to college. I don't think so. But I was like really angry that my dad, he was like, you should just go work at a restaurant and be, you know, you're cute and you can do these things. And like, you know, you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. Don't go to school. You don't need to go to school. Like that was the energy of the message that I got, whether he thinks that he said that or not, like that was the message I received.
Yeah. I like that you draw that distinction, right? Because
I think it's important, Dr. Velez. Like, I do think it's important because like, and something that I still argue with my dad till to this day is like the way your adult person experienced something versus my child version of myself that experienced the same thing can be very different.
And so often we hear this dynamic where adult children are, you know, pointing out these things to their parents, and they feel gaslit by their parents because their parents like, oh, that didn't happen that way. You're imagining that.
That's not how it happened. You didn't see it that way. I'm like, I was a child. I saw it how I saw it. So I had a lot of built up resentment. I went on to study art history. I got my bachelor's degree in art history. I graduated at the top of my class in the art history program. Like, in my mind, like against a lot of odds, right? Like I'm working my ass off. I wound up saving a lot of money. I was like, I'm never going to be in this position again. And I wasn't. I was always in a position. I put myself in a position to enjoy the work that I did. And if I didn't like a job that I was doing, I wouldn't do it. And I had enough money to like carry me until I found a job that made me happy and fulfilled and feel safe. And so I moved to California and I worked as an art dealer, and I made good money doing that. And during this time, I'm not talking to either of my parents. And I felt very alone in the world, with the exception of like my friends. And I really have a beautiful sisterhood of women that really are like sisters to me. And they're my chosen family. And we've really shown up for each other. And it's been really beautiful to see like through the years how our friendships have like grown and shifted and changed. And it's really been an amazing thing that I'm so grateful to have had these deep, meaningful relationships. And it wasn't until, so I got married in 2016. And I think looking back, I always knew that I was an alcoholic. The first time I drank to get hammered. Like I had these huge feelings, Dr. Velez. Like I grew up just with these big feelings of anger and resentment because of my circumstances.
Of course.
But also like the euphorial type of joy that would come from being on stage and performing, and like there's just like the magic of dance, the way that I experienced it. And those feelings were a lot for me to manage and like find a balance between. And so when I started drinking in high school, I would drink to get drunk. And everybody in my circle was doing that. So it all seemed very normal, and like my mom was doing that. So that seemed also very normal, even though like on some level I knew that it wasn't. Going through my 20s, going through college, living out in Los Angeles, like I partied. I had a lot of fun, like I drank to cope. I drank, to escape. I drank to be more fun at the party. I drank to like loosen up, like all of the reasons, and I never thought that I never at the time thought that I had an issue. I get married in 2016. He travels a lot for work. I was alone a lot. And I remember thinking I had gotten a DUI back in like 2009 or something like that. I don't remember what year, but it had been a while ago. That wasn't a red flag for me. I wasn't like, that wasn't enough. Like, I was like, oh no, everybody drinks and drives. Like I just got caught. Like who doesn't do this? Right. And that was what my circle was like. I truly did not think anything of it. And then when I got married, I started caring, like, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't get in trouble. This would be bad. Like, this would be bad for my public image. This would be bad. Like, it wasn't like I could die if I drink and drive. Like this would look really bad if I got caught doing something like this. And I really cared a lot about like what my spouse would look like that it would affect his image too. And so I would start to drink at home by myself. Like I began isolating and drinking at home. And I got pregnant, had my first baby. I didn't drink at all throughout the pregnancy. I haven't drank through any of my pregnancies, but like one of the things that I think about when it comes to alcoholism is like, I remember being tortured by not drinking. Like I remember being like, I hate being pregnant because I can't drink. I hate being pregnant because I can't drink. Like, when can I have a drink? People are like, you can have a tiny glass of wine. I'm like, that's torture. Who wants a tiny glass of wine? I want 2 bottles of wine, right? I have my son. I finish breastfeeding. I'm like, great, can start drinking. And I go all in on the drinking. And I'm isolating and drinking. And I'm inviting friends over who can only drink like me, right? Like, I don't want, if you drink a glass of wine, I don't want you around my house. Like, I want you, like, if you're going to get smashed like I am, like, and I was fortunate that I had like 24/7 childcare, which was very enabling. Like me being alone all the time, like was very enabling. It was very lonely. There were so many factors. Like there's so many things.
Can I add one that you may relate to? As a millennial, we have grown up in mommy wine culture that has normalized doing this, where
I felt like it gave me permission.
Exactly. That's what I mean.
Yeah. I was like, oh my gosh, mommy needs a glass of wine and there was some legitimacy to that, right? Like I'm like all day with like my baby, and like, sure, I had help, but I'm like also parenting alone a lot, like in the sense that like my spouse wasn't with me, and not at his fault. Like like my dad, in a lot of ways, he's out supporting our family, like earning money so that we can doing something he loves so that he can support us. Great. Yeah. I'm still alone doing it. I'm still like without my partner. I'm still having to make decisions on the fly. I'm still drastically overwhelmed at the end of the day. I'm like, you know what? It's my ritual to go out and have a glass of wine, which turned into 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth. And so mommy wine culture definitely enabled me. I'm like, this is what moms do.
It's a slippery slope. Yeah.
It's a slippery slope. And I hate seeing it online because I'm like, mommy does not need a glass of wine to cope. Mommy needs like a break.
It truly makes me cringe because although again, while I get it, it is a way to cope. If we don't have other healthy coping skills or look at the source of the problem, maybe there are some things that I don't necessarily have to cope with. I actually have to try to change and ask for help. Right.
Yeah.
Rather than powering through using substances. So, you know, I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer, but you know, it is something that I think we are slowly coming into like social awareness. Yeah.
This conversation is so good, but before we keep going, I want to take a minute to thank our sponsors, Sana Skin Studio. The best way for me to describe Sana is that it feels like coming home. Unlike traditional facials, Sana's facials are rooted in education, and I love this so much. Every experience I've had at Sana has been a chance to learn more about my skin and its needs. I love that the facials are effective while also being accessible enough to be a monthly ritual rather than a yearly splurge. I'm honored to be able to provide our audience with a promo code. Use the code THENOGLOW for $25 off of your first facial at Sana when booking via sanaskinstudio.com.
Fast forward to today, I am 3 years sober. I have April 18th of 2020 is my sobriety date. I got sober during COVID, which thank God, because like if I had not hit my rock bottom, like if COVID hadn't happened, I probably would have carried on because like honestly, there was nowhere to hide during COVID.
Like that's so interesting. I actually found that like, the substance abuse rate skyrocketed. So it's so interesting. How did that happen for you? How did you just make that decision?
I think it did happen for me, right? Like I found myself being a lot more secretive about my alcohol intake, right? Because my spouse was home all the time. So I would like hide a bottle of wine in my closet, or I'd hide one in like the laundry room. So like we'd be around during the day, but I'd literally like be able to like be like, oh, I'll be right back. I'm gonna go to my closet to go organize things. And I'd be like drinking wine in my closet, like, but hiding it, right? And being secretive about it. And I think that's a big telltale, right? And so it got to a point where it got like, there was nowhere to hide from it. I hit my personal rock bottom. I had the worst night of my life, which is a sacred night for me that I don't share with a lot of people. And I say to sober people, and you hear it all the time in like programs, like, it doesn't matter what your rock bottom looked like. You could have a rock bottom in like on the floor of your penthouse apartment in the middle of Manhattan, or you could have your rock bottom underneath a bridge, you know, homeless. Like your rock bottom is your rock bottom. Whatever it takes to make you say, I have to make a change in my life.
Your personal limit. You reached it. Yeah.
You've reached your personal limit. So that was that day. I had been friends with a sober woman and I didn't know who else to call. So I called her and she was like, do you believe that you are powerless over alcohol and that your life has become unmanageable? I'm like, my life is not unmanageable. I live in this beautiful house. I have a husband. I have a kid. I have a this, I have a that. And she's like, no, like, well, what about your emotional life? Like, sure, you haven't lost your marriage. You haven't lost a job. You don't have a job. You don't like you don't have to work. Like, but what about your internal life? I'm like, I want to die. She's like, that's unmanageability. Like, that is unmanageable. The fact that you do not want to live is unmanageable. Your life is unmanageable. You find your life so unmanageable that you think you don't deserve a place on this planet. And that's not to say that I wanted to kill myself, because I did not want to kill myself. I wanted to like disappear. I wanted it to go away. I wanted it to stop. So that was the beginning of my journey. I came to a place where I was able to admit to myself and to another human being that like I was powerless over alcohol and that my life had become unmanageable. And I was able to continue through a 12-step program, and thank God that I have people in my life who support me and are on this sobriety journey with me, that I've like stayed sober for these years. And I've made so many amazing, beautiful life changes and done a lot of the bulk of the healing work during this time. People a lot of times will ask me, well, how do you know if you're an alcoholic? And I always say, like, it's a self-diagnosed disease, if you will. You know, I think that there's a big stigma around alcoholism, but I don't think it's really that. I don't think it should be. Like, if you have somebody who's like diabetic, you're like, hey, you should have all these candy bars. And they're like, no, I'm diabetic. You're like, okay, that makes sense. Like, moving on. But like with alcoholism, you could be like, hey, why aren't you drinking? Why aren't you drinking? You should drink. You should drink. Oh, come on, come on. It's only one. No, I'm like, oh no, I drink too much. I don't want to drink tonight. No, just one. I'm like, no, I'm an alcoholic. Oh, really? You can't just have one? I'm like, no, I cannot just have one. I can't, like, leave it at that. Just the same way a diabetic should not be eating blah, 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 or like whatever other disease which would require you to not like eat peanuts if you have an allergy to peanuts.
Yeah.
I have an allergy to alcohol. And that's not to say like I'm allergic, I'm going to break out in hives.
No, I get it.
Allergy in the sense that like
there's consequences.
The way that my body responds to alcohol is not acceptable or healthy. So, you know, I always encourage people to consider their relationship with alcohol, because there's so many people that are sober curious these days.
Yes.
You know, and in mommy wine culture, like we're seeing that a lot more women are curious about their relationship with alcohol. Not necessarily saying, oh, I think I'm an alcoholic, but like, let me look at this. Let me look at this. And so my biggest piece of advice to people who are sober curious is to like try some controlled drinking. What does controlled drinking look like? If you're used to going out, or like, let's say after the day is done, you're used to having 2 cocktails or whatever after your kids go to bed. And maybe you do this with your partner. Maybe you do this by yourself. Maybe you do this like over a conversation on the phone with your girlfriends, whatever. What if you said to yourself, I'm not going to have 2, I'm going to have 1 tonight. How do you feel? Just observe, don't judge, don't anything. Just how does that make you feel? For me, I was like, that's torture. I want another. 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 There was like an obsession. I want another. I want another. Like even the nights I remember going out with my spouse, then like we'd go to dinner and I'd be like, I gotta rein it in tonight. Gotta not drink because like he's in town and I'm not gonna drink tonight. So I'd have a glass of wine at dinner and I'd be like, okay, that's my cutoff. But like inside, I was like miserable.
Yeah, restricted.
Like, not even enjoying my time with him because I was like
all consumed. Yeah, all
consumed by this idea that like I needed to have another glass of wine. Today, I live freely from that. Like wine and drink and alcohol doesn't cross my mind, like because of the work that I've done. You know, and every day, day in and day out, people say it's one day at a time. It really is one day at a time, because like there are times where I think to myself, I have 3 small children. Like I'm never going to be able to like have a champagne toast at my kid's wedding, or like celebrating when their baby is born, or, you know, whatever, all these future things. And like, if I think of my life in those terms, like that seems like undoable. It's like it's an unparalleled mountain to climb. Like, how am I going to climb a mountain of my whole life? And that's where like, I really, really, Dr. Velez, have to like stay present and be like, you know what? I'm not going to drink right now.
Yeah.
How about that? Like right this second, I'm not going to go get a drink.
Yeah. And that's all you have control over, really.
Like, and sometimes it's like 20-minute blocks, right? I'm like, just don't drink for 20 minutes. And like, that's hard for people to get through in addiction, you know, but eventually like you get through it and the feeling passes. And hopefully like you're instilling better ways, whether that's writing, whether that's praying, whether that's getting on the phone with another sober person to help you like work through whatever problem you're facing. You know, like I still have a need, Dr. Velez, to escape. I've been escaping since I was a child, like I said, through dance and through everything else, right? Like life gets hard. You know, last year I found out I was pregnant. My mother immediately died right afterwards. And I found out that my then 4-year-old was diagnosed with cancer. And it was one of the most difficult years of my life. And I stayed sober through it because like, even though those things were so difficult, hating myself every day that I was in active alcoholism was harder. And I know actually on a soul level that it's because of my sobriety that I was able to like face those obstacles with a presence of mind and like the most care and bring the most joy and light as possible to a really, really difficult slew of events in a short period of time. And I really do think that has a lot to do with my sobriety. I feel like I know who I am because of my sobriety. I did not know who I was when I was drinking. I was able to start my business in my sobriety, my own podcast, like where I feel like I'm helping hundreds of thousands of people. Like And I used to think, who am I to have this voice? I used to hate myself so much, Dr. Velez, that like, and I used to feel so much shame over my drinking and over the choices I've made in my life and over like the things that I've endured, like even the sexual abuse that I blame myself, or like I blame myself for all these other things, right? I was able to really like forgive myself. And I think that I'm still forgiving myself every day. But like my need to escape is not as great. And when it shows up, I'm able to process it in a much, much healthier way. You know, like I can like take an objective look at it, and it's not an automatic reach for something outside of myself. Like I have so much more internal peace because of that. And it's not just that I've worked a 12-step program, you know, I go to a therapist weekly.
I was
Like,
going to ask you that, like, what tools, again, how did you get there?
I mean, honestly, like being part of a 12-step program is one of the most amazing experiences I've ever partaken in my life. Like, I truly think that like a 12-step program benefits literally anyone. I'm like, everybody should do this because it teaches us about like reflection and respect and like owning my side of the street, owning my part in a shitty situation, like being able to assess any resentments that I have so that I can let go of resentments, like apologizing for the things that I've done wrong. It is so, you have to actually like apologize to people that you've harmed in your life. Like that, the level of humility that a 12-step program requires is like otherworldly. And I think it brings people a really big sense of compassion. And so I've been in therapy since I was a kid. Therapy wasn't helping my alcohol intake. I actually remember being in DBT therapy, and there would be like a questionnaire about like how your alcohol intake. Like I had to do this whole filled out, like, did I feel like this? Did I feel like that? Did I feel like this? Did you exercise today? Did you take your medication? Did you do this? Do you do that? Did you drink today? And I would lie on it.
Yeah, it's only going to reach you as much as you're willing to be truthful.
Exactly.
And sometimes we're just not ready. Yeah.
I wasn't ready. I was lying. The therapy wasn't helping me with my alcoholism. Speaking with other alcoholics helped me with my alcoholism. Again, like you mentioned this in the beginning of your intro, it's like having a community of people, seeing people that looked like me, because I had this idea that alcoholics are like toothless people under the bridge only. Like, you know, like you think about an alcoholic and your mind immediately goes to like the bottom of the barrel, like the complete bottom. And it's like the same thing. We do this with everything. We do this with women who get Botox. We think about like people who get like Botox and filler, and we think about worst case scenario of like how you can look like a total cat or whatever. Like when there's like a middle area. There's doctors, teachers, lawyers, professionals, mothers, fathers, like
it's across SES
who are suffering from alcoholism, and they might be functioning highly, or they may not. Like
externally,
like you look at my life and you're like, this bitch has it made. Like you don't know that I hate myself
internally, what was happening,
and that I hate myself. That is unmanageable. And today I don't hate myself. So I feel like I'm winning at life. Because I have a deep sense of like self-love. I have a deep sense of connection to source, which is my higher power that I believe in. Like I believe in doing the work. I believe in showing up. I believe in admitting when I'm wrong, even though that's hard to do sometimes. Because I don't like to be wrong. I don't like it. I don't like to be wrong. Like who does?
But again, that could come from, you know, like you mentioned when you were a child, where you needed to, you felt unsafe and you relied on yourself being right in order to keep yourself safe. So you have a strong attachment to that need. And again, when we look back at why we created these ways to cope, we need to remember that we were just trying to survive, right? And now, are we still in that stage? Are you still trying to survive? And if that's no longer the case, now I'm a full-grown adult, I have autonomy, I am safe. Do I need to look at my coping skills and question whether I need to readjust them? Do I still need to be living in survival? Or is it time to readjust and say, okay, what do I need now instead of to survive, to actually thrive?
And also like forgive. Like I need to forgive myself that the things
Yeah.
that, like, for the things that I did when I was in
Sure.
survival mode,
Yeah.
because I hurt people, I hurt myself, I said things, I allowed myself to be disrespected in ways that like are not like on a soul level hurt me.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have to and that's probably the harder thing about living in sobriety, is that every day I have to wake up and I have to forgive myself for the ways that, like, the things that I did when I was in survival mode. And there are still times, Dr. Velez, that I am still in survival mode because these things have been programmed into my brain from we are programmed, right? Of
Yeah.
our life views from the time that we're born.
Yeah.
And so like unprogramming that and retraining yourself to learn a different way to look at things, that takes time and effort and it's hard work. So I want to shout out anybody who's listening that is like doing the work, is curious. Even if you're curious about doing the work, I think like your mind is in the right space, because like even your curiosity
It's a
is
sign.
something,
It's
is
a
a
sign.
sign.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm grateful. I'm really grateful. A lot of people like, there's a stigma about alcoholism. I'm grateful. Like, I don't want to say that I'm like grateful that I'm an alcoholic, but I'm grateful that I'm able to come to terms with my alcoholism so that I can grow and heal and hopefully help other people who are sick and suffering.
Yeah. Yeah. I see that. I see that like the phoenix, rises from the ashes and alchemizes their story, uses it, turns that pain into some type of purpose. At least that's what I'm gathering from you.
That's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah. That it's somehow, I was going to ask you, are you proud of yourself?
I am very proud of myself.
You should be.
I think that like pride is like a funny thing, but like I am proud of myself.
Yeah.
Like if little me could, it like brings me to tears sometimes. Like I think
Yeah.
if little me could see me now.
You've been hustling for a long time.
I've been hustling for a long time. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm really humbled and I'm grateful and I'm proud. And I like oftentimes find myself like giving a virtual hug to like the younger version of me who was so scared and so like lacking in hope and belief
Mm-hmm.
and wondering how my life was going to turn out. And I'm like, I look around and not just like the things that I have, because those are just things, but like on a soul level of like who I am and the friendships that I have and the relationships that I have in my life and the way that I'm able to show up as a parent. And I feel really proud of myself.
Mm-hmm. It should be. It should be.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your story with us. I know it's
For
going
allowing
to
me
touch.
to.
It's going to touch who needs to hear it, and hopefully, they can draw what they need to draw from it. I always say there's no coincidences. So if you're listening and something inside you is saying, "This is my call to action," I hope that you answer. So, Nikki, at the end of the show, I always ask my guests, given the experiences that you've had, what would you say you know for sure to be true?
So this is kind of like a deep thing. I read this book by Martha Beck, and it's called The Way of Integrity. And something she discusses in the book is that the one thing that we know to be true is that nothing is true.
Mm-hmm.
Not that like change, right? Like a lot of people are saying like change is the only thing that is consistent. And I believe that too. I think the only thing that is true is that I don't know what is or is not true, except for like this one moment.
Mm-hmm. So stay curious, right? Stay curious about what could be of life. Did you plan for life to go this way for you? Was there moments where you thought it would never be this way?
I don't think I planned any of this.
That's why you just gotta, part of the plot. You have to stay curious and open to um the discovery of our inner strengths, right? Where sometimes, like, again, another recurrent theme that I hear in your message is this coming back to self, right? Where one could argue many years you were running away,
Yeah.
and now you're able to just come back to self. And there's a peace there, and it doesn't mean it's easy, but there's a peace that comes with, now I know thyself, and I'm still learning about myself, and at least I'm not running away from myself, even when I want to, because that again, that desire to escape is gonna. But it's also a sign to say something is not right. This feeling that makes me want to run away means I need to quickly recalibrate. What do I need? And by the way, sometimes I just need water.
Right.
I need to eat. I need some peace. I need to make time for joy. But tuning in and saying, instead of running away, what do I do with what is this signaling to me? And
Well, it's
doing what we need to
information.
do. Yeah.
It's information and showing ourselves grace. I think showing ourselves grace in the process, because like, I think we can be really, really hard on ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Like we hold ourselves to like this, like a really, really high standard. And like, sometimes we're even more like patient and generous with other people than we are like with ourselves.
Yeah. Self-compassion is key. I think that's what I'm hoping too with this podcast. I've always hoped that hearing other people saying, hey, you're not alone. You're not alone. It might seem that somebody else on the other side has it all together, that everyone is perfect, that you're the only one struggling with this. But believe me, there are far more similarities that unite us than our individual experiences that separate us.
Totally.
So thank you so much. It's an honor to be in your company and to share and to have you share this story. I hope those of you listening, again, drew what you needed to draw from this story. And thank you for listening. See you next time.
See you next time.
This podcast was brought to you by Sana Skin Studio. Be sure to use my code, TheNoGlow, for $25 off of your first facial at Sana when booking via sanaskinstudio.com. More than a skin studio, Sana is a movement towards healthier skin and self-love. Thank you so much for listening to The Know. If you loved this episode, go ahead and share it with a friend. Words are so powerful, and someone may need to hear what we covered today. And if you really loved this episode, please take a moment to rate the show and leave a review. Your comments are so important and valued, and they give other listeners insight on what to expect on The Know. You can connect with me personally via Instagram at Nikki Spo and The Know with Nikki Spo. My hope for you today is that you are fearless in looking inward so that you can be your highest, most authentic self and go after the life of your dreams.